A man is dragged through a shattered city of temples and smoke. He is an emperor. And he's begging his enemy to kill him now, fast. But the conquerors don't want a clean ending. They want a lesson carved into history. And his world was built on blood long before they arrived. Ancient civilizations didn't just fight wars. They engineered fear. Tonight, you'll see the brutal practices empires used to control minds, public torture, ritual killing, human trophies. And you'll follow one final ruler who witnessed that machine of violence from the inside, right up to his last breath. His name was Cuauhtémoc, descending eagle. He wasn't born into a peaceful crown. He inherited a nightmare. By the time Cuauhtémoc took power, the Aztec Empire was already a blade pressed to the throat of its neighbors. It demanded tribute. It demanded obedience. And in the most chilling moments, it demanded bodies. Captives could be marched up pyramid steps as drums thundered below. Death transformed into spectacle, religion, and warning. But the Aztecs weren't the first to weaponize terror. Centuries earlier, the Assyrian Empire perfected psychological warfare. Their kings advertised cruelty like a signature. Mass punishments, public executions, and citywide fear designed to prevent rebellion before it started. The message wasn't subtle: resist, and you will be remembered for how you suffered. In the Mediterranean, Sparta built an entire society around controlled brutality. Boys were trained through deprivation and violence to become weapons. The state didn't just raise soldiers. It carved human beings into instruments. And below them, the Helot population lived under a constant shadow, terror used as policy, not accident. Then came Rome, where death became entertainment with architecture built for it. The arena turned killing into a civic event. The empire understood something ancient and terrifying. If you can make people cheer for suffering, you can make them accept almost anything. Cuauhtémoc stood at the collision point of these truths. Because when the Spanish arrived, they brought their own empire logic: steel, disease, alliances, and a cold certainty that they could replace one terrifying order with another. History remembers Cuauhtémoc not because he was the most powerful emperor. It remembers him because he was the last one. The final symbol of a civilization that could be magnificent and merciless at the same time, caught between the violence it practiced and the violence that came to end it. And in his final years, Cuauhtémoc would learn the darkest rule of conquest. The gods don't have to be real. Fear is enough. Cuauhtémoc rose in the worst possible moment, when the world was already collapsing. In 1520, Tenochtitlan seethed with rage and grief. The Spanish had entered the city as guests, then as captors. Violence erupted. Trust evaporated overnight. And the old emperor Moctezuma II was dead, his rule ending in confusion, accusation, and blood. Power didn't fall into Cuauhtémoc's hands. It was thrown at him like a burning torch. He was young, but not naive. He understood what held the empire together. Not kindness. Not diplomacy. Fear, ritual, and the certainty that the state could take everything: your harvest, your children, your future. He also understood what fear looked like when it turned inward. Tenochtitlan was a city of water and stone, built like a dream. Causeways stretched across the lake. Markets roared with trade. Temples climbed into the sky. But beneath the beauty was a system that demanded payment in suffering. War captives could be displayed. Skulls could be stacked on racks as a public declaration: this is the cost of resisting. Cuauhtémoc inherited that machinery. And now he aimed it at a new enemy. The Spanish were not impressed by intimidation. They had cannons, horses, armor, and allies, thousands of indigenous warriors who hated Aztec tribute demands more than they feared Aztec temples. So Cuauhtémoc did what an emperor cornered by history always does. He tightened his grip. He ordered defenses along the causeways. He turned canals into traps. He fought street by street, bridge by bridge, as the lake itself became a battlefield. He watched famine creep into the city. He watched disease, smallpox, erase entire families. Still, he didn't surrender. Because surrender didn't just mean defeat. It meant humiliation. It meant the end of the rituals that claimed the gods demanded blood. It meant admitting, in front of the world, that the empire's terror had limits. Cuauhtémoc became powerful in the way dying stars become bright. Not stable. Not safe. But impossible to ignore. And as the siege tightened, one thought began to poison the air. If the city falls, what will the conquerors do to an emperor who once ruled by fear? The city didn't fall in one dramatic moment. It bled out slowly. Tenochtitlan was surrounded. The Spanish built brigantines to control the lake, cutting off escape and supplies. Each day was smaller than the last. Each night carried the same question: who will break first? And betrayal wasn't always a knife in the dark. Sometimes it was hunger. Alliances that once held under Aztec intimidation began to snap. The empire's old system, tribute, punishment, forced loyalty, became its weakness. Those who had paid in taxes and fear now paid the Spanish in information, manpower, and revenge. Cuauhtémoc was fighting two wars at once. One against the invaders. And one against the consequences of the empire he led. Inside the city, the moral universe collapsed. The rituals that once promised order could no longer guarantee victory. When a civilization believes the gods demand sacrifice, every defeat feels like proof that you haven't sacrificed enough. The pressure becomes insane. The temptation becomes monstrous. Outside the city, the Spanish carried their own brutal logic. They spoke of salvation, but conquest is never gentle. Captured nobles were used as leverage. Prisoners became bargaining chips. And the search for gold turned human lives into tools. Cuauhtémoc's turning point came when he realized something worse than defeat. The Spanish didn't just want the city. They wanted the story. They wanted to replace Aztec terror with a new kind of fear. Fear of the cross, fear of the crown, fear of punishment delivered in a language the conquered didn't even understand. And then came the quiet, final betrayal, time itself. The causeways were taken. The neighborhoods burned. The canals filled with wreckage. Food vanished. The empire's capital became a trap. Cuauhtémoc tried to escape across the lake in a canoe, not to save himself, but to continue the fight, to keep the symbol alive. Because in ancient empires, symbols are armies. Kill the symbol, and resistance dissolves. But the lake was no longer his ally. Spanish patrols cut through the water like hunters. The canoe was intercepted. The emperor, descending eagle, was seized like any other captive. And in that instant, the power shifted completely. The man who once oversaw a civilization built on ritual violence was now a prize. A living key. A body the conquerors could use to unlock the last hidden vaults of an empire. The siege was ending. The real cruelty was about to begin. Cuauhtémoc was brought before Hernan Cortes. Not as a ruler. As evidence. His city was collapsing behind him. Temples blackened, streets littered with silence, the lake choked with ruin. The emperor stood at the edge of his world and faced the man who had come to erase it. According to accounts, Cuauhtémoc asked for a quick death. Not mercy. Not negotiations. A clean ending. Cortes refused. Because an executed emperor becomes a martyr. A living emperor becomes a lever. Cuauhtémoc was held, questioned, used. His status turned into a cage. The Spanish demanded treasure. Gold. A final payout for the war they had spent years building. But the truth was uglier. Empires don't stop taking when they've taken everything. They keep digging, because conquest creates its own hunger. Then came the humiliation that ancient powers understood too well. Not just confinement. Not just chains. But public control. In civilizations built on fear, Assyria, Rome, and empires like them, the point of punishment was never only pain. It was theater. A message to everyone watching: this is what happens when you lose. Cuauhtémoc, once the center of ritual order, was reduced to a problem to be solved. His identity was stripped down to one question: where is the gold? Historical accounts describe torture used to force answers. The details echo across centuries of conquest. Different flags, same method. Break the symbol so the people break with it. And Cuauhtémoc didn't give them what they wanted. That defiance is what makes this moment terrifying. Not because it's heroic in a simple way, but because it reveals something colder. Cuauhtémoc had lived inside a system where suffering was normalized, where captives were displayed, where death could be ritual. He knew exactly what cruelty was supposed to do to a human mind. And still, he held the line. But imprisonment changes the air around a leader. Rumors form. Desperation whispers. Former allies wonder if survival is possible under new masters. Some collaborate. Some plot. Some simply try to disappear. The Spanish feared rebellion like a shadow that never leaves. And Cuauhtémoc, alive, remembered, unbroken, was the shadow's source. Years passed. The empire was gone. A new colonial order rose over the ruins. Yet Cuauhtémoc remained a problem that could not be solved with occupation alone. So the conquerors began to consider the oldest imperial solution. Not conquest. Not torture. Not negotiation. Removal. Cuauhtémoc didn't die in the ruins of his capital. That would have been too simple. Too clean. Too legendary. He died later, when the world had moved on, when the fires had cooled, when people had started to believe the violence was finished. In 1525, Cortes led an expedition toward Honduras, chasing rumors of rebellion and imagined enemies. He brought Cuauhtémoc along, still valuable, still dangerous, still a living reminder that the Aztec world had once stood here and ruled. Think about that. An emperor forced to march with the man who destroyed his throne. Day after day. Mile after mile. Not imprisoned in a cell, imprisoned in the future. During the expedition, Cortes claimed he uncovered a plot. A conspiracy. A plan to rise up, to kill Spaniards, to reclaim power. Whether the threat was real, exaggerated, or convenient has been debated for centuries. But in imperial history, the accusation often matters more than the truth. Because fear doesn't need evidence. It only needs possibility. Cuauhtémoc and other nobles were condemned. The method was public and final, an execution meant to sever hope. Accounts describe him being hanged. No battlefield. No last stand on temple steps. No moment of victory for his people. Just a calculated end delivered under the authority of a new empire, to ensure the old one could never return. And that's the darkest twist of all. Cuauhtémoc's civilization had used ritual death as control. Now he was killed as control. Different gods. Different language. Same purpose. His death didn't just remove a man. It erased a rallying point. It told survivors that even the highest bloodline could be cut down far from home, far from witnesses, far from the sacred center of the world. Ancient brutality wasn't only in the act. It was in the message the act delivered. Assyria carved warnings into stone. Rome built amphitheaters for it. Sparta raised children inside it. And here, in the aftermath of Tenochtitlan, the conquerors turned an emperor into a final announcement. Your past is not coming back. And your future belongs to us. Cuauhtemoc vanished into history as a symbol, not only of Aztec resistance, but of how empires end. Not with peace. With an example. It's easy to watch ancient brutality like it's a parade of monsters. Assyrians who boasted of terror. Spartans who trained boys to endure suffering. Romans who sold death as entertainment. Aztecs who turned sacrifice into cosmic duty. Barbaric, we say, and we close the book. But here's the truth that should make your stomach tighten. These civilizations weren't chaotic. They were organized. They weren't ignorant. They were strategic. They understood people. They understood that fear scales. That spectacle persuades. That punishment, when made public, can do more than 1,000 speeches. They built systems where cruelty wasn't a failure of morality, it was a technology of control. And Cuauhtemoc proves something even darker. When a violent empire collapses, the violence doesn't disappear. It gets inherited. The Spanish didn't end brutality. They redirected it. They replaced one structure of terror with another. New rulers, new laws, new symbols, same old human vulnerability. The need to feel safe, even if someone else must suffer to create that safety. So what do we do with that? Because the most disturbing part isn't that ancient people were cruel. It's that cruelty worked. It built obedience. It bought time. It held empires together long enough to feel eternal. Until they weren't. Cuauhtémoc's final moments weren't just the death of an emperor. They were the death of an idea, that power could be made permanent through fear. And yet history keeps trying the same experiment. Different uniforms. Different slogans. Same machinery. So here's the question that doesn't let you off the hook. If the most civilized empires of the ancient world needed brutality to survive, what does that say about what human beings will accept when they're told it's necessary?